these aren't the only 5 by any means, right? Happy 5 Fact Friday. 5 Fact Friday. I'm Charlie Lambden, and it is 5 Fact Friday. Misophonia sufferers, block your ears now for 2 seconds. When it's that hot, you have to slurp it. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Moving Over Charlie. This is 5 Fact Friday with me, Charlie Lambden. And in the usual chaotic Friday fashion, I'm late. So sorry for those of you I've kept waiting. Good morning. Who have we got here? Spherical Hang, Hazel Whitaker, Liam Jennings, Robert Jones. Different crowd in the mornings compared to the evenings. Andrew George, Christopher Darling, Scarlet Spear, and Andrew Taylor, Shady Shack, Purple How. Hi, guys. Nice to have you all. Everyone bunking off work, skiving. Whatever your reasons for being here, I'm very happy that you're here to join me. It makes such a big difference doing these videos, knowing that there's a live audience watching, okay? When I'm having to record stuff, which I don't do as much these days, I find it really, as I'm recording, there's no one listening, no one's watching, nobody cares. But when I know you're there for real, good morning, Romando Senior. It means everything. So thanks for coming. Let me just quickly run you through the 5 headlines of the day. This one here, number 1, Serious Fraud Office investigates a £300 million fraud in social housing. Yeah, let's not even go there. Fact number 2, UK rents fall for the first time on record. The number of people whose heads have exploded on the back of this news going, no, it's not possible, it's not true, not in my area. They're soaring, rents are skyrocketing. Well, they're not. They're really not. There might be a few areas. It might feel like they are to those of you looking for the first time and looking at everything being so expensive. It just feels like must be going up, but they're not. And this is good news, but for bad reasons. We'll get into that. Number 3, tragic, absolute tragic employment data for December. 43,000 more people off payroll, out of work in 1 month in December. This is obviously a major downward pressure on housing costs and the housing market. It's good news for those who are looking to buy this year. It's awful news for everybody affected. It's not good news if you're selling. That's fact number 3. Fact number 4, inflation ticks back up. Now, it's not a hugely meaningful move, but it does mean that the chances of the rate cuts that the debt junkies are so desperate for all the time might be moving a little bit further away or be a little bit less likely to happen. But there are other factors that will affect that too. And fact number 5, the media goes nuts over Rightmove's January record jump in house asking prices. But nobody mentioned the fact that their own data also showed that first-time buyer average asking prices, even after the record January jump, were 0.7% lower than a year ago. Nobody mentioned that. Like, to me, that's a much more interesting and newsworthy headline than the record jump in asking prices, which actually, amazingly, and I will show you again for those of you who didn't see Monday night's live stream, is not even, it's a mathematical misnomer when the overall average jump in asking prices is higher in percentage terms than any of the asking price increases in the subsets, right? So they say that the average jump in asking prices was 2.8%, but when you break it down by first-time buyer prices, second stepper prices, and top of the ladder prices, none of those went up by 2.8%, right? So they're not lying, but it's a mathematical misnomer that leads to a false impression being created, which for some reason both Rightmove and the media seem to really enjoy doing, not to anyone's benefit at all. I mean, it literally doesn't help anyone to spread that narrative. I'll get into my little rant on that nearer the time. And a little bonus fact that I just discovered and heard on the news this morning is this one. Thousands of people are living in homes that pose a risk to their health and safety after the catastrophic failure of two government insulation schemes. Major defects have been found in over 30,000 houses fitted with insulation since 2022. All right. What's the moral of the story? Government shouldn't intervene in markets. Even when it's well-intentioned, they fluff it up. Government should be making sure we are safe, number one, and should be promoting conditions for prosperity and rising employment, number two. And other than that, they should leave us the hell alone, because every time they meddle and interfere, it makes everything worse. And no matter how many times that's the case, they just keep on doing it. So government's important. We need them. They should be keeping us safe. They should be creating great conditions for prosperity. Other than that, they should leave us alone. Yes, good morning, Kicking Mustang. I hear your message on your feelings about Rightmove. Okay, let's get into fact number one. I'm not going to go into this in big detail, and you might think, hang on, Charlie, this fact isn't something that affects the housing market. It's just, again, I mean, this is government related. So the Serious Fraud Office has arrested 6 people and searched 7 sites in connection with a fraud and bribery investigation into the past management of Home Real Estate Investment Trust. Okay, raids and arrests. This is just a few days ago, as it announces a new... So it's a listed UK social housing company. The suspected offending has an estimated value of £300 million. So this is exactly where the government should be intervening, but they're too late. They should have prevented this in the first place, not after we've lost 300 million quid worth of public money in a social housing scam. We go, oh no, we better go. I mean, of course they've got to go and stop it, but the whole idea of government is to prevent this stuff in the first place. Okay, Altrincham, Maidenhead, London, a commercial site in Manchester, National Crime Agency involved, listed on the London Stock Exchange, raised £850 million in its first 3 years of trading. Investors were told that their money would be used to buy and restore properties that would be block let to publicly funded charities and community interest companies to house rough sleepers, veterans, and people struggling with addiction. Returns would be generated to investors from rent payments. Don't you just love it when money is made on the back of these poor, vulnerable people by people saying, hey, we're going to help all these vulnerable people. Give us £850 million. Nothing to see here. We're just helping people, huh? What's happened in that time? Rough sleeping numbers have gone up, homeless numbers have gone up, and these scammers have got away with 300 million quid. Slow clap for the government, because clearly none of the guardrails or safety keeping schemes worked in that instance, did they? Okay, next one. And actually, this is probably, I think, the most important news item this week is everyone understanding what this means. Okay. Annual rents fall for the first time in 15 years. I mean, yeah. I remember the first time I started talking about my expectations on rent prices going back a few years, and they were going up there. And I remember saying they're going up, but they're not going to keep going up. They cannot keep going up when the collective supply of money that pays for rents is going down. In other words, people's disposable income, inflation just wiping out people's buying power and budgets, take-home incomes going down, cost of living going up, unemployment going up. It was just not possible for rents to keep rising. We go, oh, but the people. Well, the people don't have the money to pay the rents, do they? it's got to be people with the money to pay the rents who pass credit checks and reference checks. It's the same as house prices. And what's happened is a lot of those people have now moved back home, moved in with friends, doubled up, become lodgers, or whatever it might be. But when the supply of money, not the supply of people, the supply of money to pay for rents starts to contract or stops growing, this is a mathematical inevitability. Okay. And listen, there are people out there looking for places to rent who will be experiencing the opposite and going, well, no, rents seem to be going up in the market I'm looking. And that is, of course, possible and happening in some areas. The relevance of this to the housing market as a whole is that if rents are coming down, it means yields are coming down. If yields are coming down, it means the underlying asset value, in other words, the house price, is also going to come down because there's this kind of mechanical link. Okay, yields and asset prices are linked to each other inextricably. It's not the only thing that affects the asset prices, but it's the biggest one when it comes to buy to let. And so, yeah, this is another new layer of downward pressure on house prices in the affected markets. So not all house prices, but in the affected markets. So rents ended 2025 below where they started for the first time on record, according to Hamptons. So this is an estate agent telling us this, right? And I actually have to give credit to Hamptons. Although they are owned by the evil corporation that is Connells, Hamptons itself has always been a company I've admired. I'll tell you why. In my personal experience, right? Back in the early 2000s, when I was delivering a one-stop photography, floor plan, and virtual tour services to London estate agents and Sydney estate agents, Hamptons became my biggest client in London. Like 15 plus offices of Hamptons were using me and my team to do this property photography, floor plans, etc. And we had hundreds of estate agency clients. We had dozens of large companies. We had, Knight Frank, Savills, Jackson Stopps, Douglas and Gordon, all these kind of companies. Dexter's was a client of these, Chesterton's. Hamptons was the only one. I really mean this. They were the only large corporate agent that didn't mess us around, didn't pay late, didn't act with bad faith. And I've always remembered Hamptons for that reason. And so it doesn't surprise me that a company with that culture, even though it's been through many changes of ownership, still actually has, I think, a much less guffy output of its PR. So for that, I give Hamptons credit where it's due, right? This is not price pumping news, is it? In fact, it's the opposite. So it's the first time rents fell over a full calendar year since the agent's records began in 2011. The figure, and this is amazing that Connells lets them do this, are based on rental data from across the Connells Group, which comprises more than 57,000 homes let each year and more than 66,000 renewed contracts, and is based on achieved rather than advertised rents. So that is 120 odd thousand sample size of actual achieved rents. So it's not affected by asking prices. And the government measures rental asking prices and thinks that they're going up. But look at this, the actual rents are going down. Really important to remember the difference between asking prices and actual prices. Now, not a huge amount, only £10 a month less than the last year for the same home. But look, it follows similar findings from Rightmove, which this week reported that average advertised rent, so that is asking rents outside of London, fell 1% in the final 3 months of last year. Okay. This is a big deal, guys. This is a really, really, really big deal. I'd say it's one of the most profound, far-reaching, and long-term pieces of new information on the housing market that there's been for quite some time. It's a pretty historic thing. It is a good thing that housing costs are coming down, the cost of rent is coming down. It's good, that this means that it's a downward pressure on house prices. The only bad thing about it is the reason that it's happening is because of rising unemployment. Okay. And on the scale of things that affect house prices, rising unemployment is a much bigger, so employment and wages and jobs is a much bigger input factor to house prices than interest rates. Okay, interest rates are an accelerant or a depressant on house prices, but they are not a primary driver. A lot of people think they are. Oh, the rate cuts, house prices go up if rate cuts. It's not that simple, guys. It's not that simple. If only it was. So quickly run through some of these. So Greater London, look at that. That's let's split it up into Inner London. 3.7% down rents in Inner London last year on year. 1.6% down in Outer London. Okay, East of England, 0.5% up. So yes, there are some areas where rents might be going up slightly. And funnily enough, East of England is where house prices are coming down. And I think that that's because of fewer people being able to afford house prices and more people renting, possibly. Southeast down 1%, Southwest up 0.7%, East Midlands down slightly, West Midlands up 2%, actually. So, yeah, so in the West Midlands, up, Northeast up, and Northwest up 2.5%. So rents are going up generally in the North and in the West Midlands. But Yorkshire and the Humber down, Wales down, Scotland up a tiny bit, Great Britain overall down 0.7%. Okay, so remember the links to all of these articles, if you want to watch them, are linked to below. So there's one page on my website that I've got links to all these, so you can go and read them. And if you want to be informed, and excuse me, 1 second, got a call coming up. What I'm trying to do with this information is give people the background knowledge to defend themselves against the endless guffy, everything's going up or everything's great stuff that you hear from agents, right? I'm trying to give you verifiable data that you can factor into your opinion on how this is going to affect your market. Okay, everyone's got lots of different people watch this. Got property investors, got buyers, got sellers, first-time buyers, downsizing, people who have retired. And it affects everyone differently, okay? I just want to try and arm you to be able to debunk and dodge the guff coming out of the media, okay? I have to disappoint. So Hoang Alan on YouTube says, just to let you know, I'm a first-time buyer and I've just got my offer accepted using your offer template. Thanks a lot for your valuable sharing. That really worked really well in my case. Fingers crossed for next steps. Makes my day, genuinely. It literally lifts my spirits every time I hear someone use my email template and it got their offer accepted and it got them into a home. That's why I do this, guys. It's why I do it. So it's like job satisfaction level 10 when this happens. Thank you for letting me know. Okay, rambly ramble, on to the next one. So fact number, what are we on now? Number 3. So boo, sad, not good, genuinely miserable information, which chimes with my feelings. Everything I'm seeing everywhere is pointing to the fact that we the people, never mind the economy, we the people are suffering a real recession at street level. So payrolled employees in the UK fell by 155,000 in the year to November 2025, right? And decreased by, this is a year out of date. Decreased by 33,000 in 1 month. But when looking to September to November, the number of payrolled employees in just 3 months fell by 135,000. These numbers don't add up. That's the Labour Force survey, and 43,000 over a quarter. Okay, I got my numbers mixed up there. If that's a quarter, no, it's 43,000 on the month. Okay, so the early estimate of payrolled employees for December decreased by 184,000 on the year and 43,000 on the month. So that is nearly 1,500 people every single day, 7 days a week, losing their payroll jobs. That is catastrophic. That is financial crisis level unemployment drop. That is a tragedy, and it's disastrous, and it's underreported. It's just underreported. And it's going to continue to be a major influence and a major factor in what's happening to house prices, because the number one contributing factor to house prices is lending based on salaries. If you don't have a salary, you can't buy a house, right? So every one of those 43,000 people who may or may not have been a first-time buyer has now been removed from the market as a first-time buyer by the fact that they've lost their job. I don't know how many of them, I don't know what proportion of that 43,000 have been are first-time buyers, but any of them who are either first-time buyers or planning to move house and would have needed a new mortgage have now been removed. So not only will this affect prices, it will also affect transaction volumes. It's a downward pressure on transaction volumes. It's the saddest news there is, genuinely. It's heartbreaking. It's weird when the numbers get this big, somehow you kind of go numb to it. You know, you see a story about one person whose life gets, whose life is changed by the fact they've now lost their job and can't get another one. And that's a tragedy. I mean, it can bring tears to your eyes. Just for one person, then you hear about 10 people, 100, 1,000, 10,000, 43,000. You just kind of go numb to that news. Awful. And without a job, you can't pay rent, let alone a mortgage. When we're having a decimation of employed people being removed from the mortgage demand marketplace like this, the effect of interest rates on house prices becomes trivial, incidental, unimportant, right? This is much, much bigger news than anything that happens to house prices. And I know everyone loves to, they week in, week out, mortgage rates this, mortgage rates that, mortgage rates this, mortgage rates that. It's a red herring. It's irrelevant compared to these things that are happening, like rents going down, what that means for house prices, and employment numbers going down. And wage growth is flatlining as well. Real wage growth is now below 1%. Sorry about the sad news there, but it's easily the most significant in the immediate short term on house prices. That is a downward effect. Then we have inflation ticking back up. Well, obviously that's not good for anybody, but because inflation is one of the key, not the only one, but it's one of the key contributing factors to the Bank of England's decision to raise or lower their base rate, because their number one task is to keep inflation under 2%. When that ticks up and moves away from them, it reduces the likelihood of a rate cut. The likelihood of a rate cut is not high anyway. It's not low either. There's a moderate, before this news, there was a moderate expectation of a rate cut at some point this year, a small one. It's already factored in. As Housing Stig pointed out on Wednesday night, 2 and 5 year fixed rate mortgages are now below the Bank of England base rate, right? Which is an unsustainable thing. So, in other words, they really have already priced in falling rates. And the reason there's so much competition, the reason those rates are so low with mortgages relative to the base rate, is that there's so much competition, not enough people are borrowing. I mean, you look at transaction volumes and think, well, transaction volumes are holding up okay, and that's true. But what would be happening if there was less new unemployment is that there would be more transactions. Yeah, there'd be more transactions, more people borrowing mortgages. And as I keep trying to point out to everyone in the business of selling houses or selling mortgages, the lower house prices are, the more houses and mortgages you will sell. You cannot argue with it. Where is the sense in talking house prices up? Where is the sense in talking up, in going, yay, cheering for young people being unable to afford houses because the house prices are going up? Where is the sense? Someone give me one good reason why we should cheer for house price growth. Just one, when it's at the levels of unaffordability that it is now. Yeah. Other than the selfish reason for the individual owners, yeah, we're making money on our house. Cool. But the overall expense and effect on society as a whole and on the industry's ability to sell mortgages and houses goes down. Honestly, one day light will dawn on the donuts and the numpties who think that talking house prices up is a clever idea and realize, hang on a second, we will actually sell more houses. If we stop talking prices up, if we stop overvaluing property, if we stop creating the expectation of rising house prices, and they kind of settle, flatline, maybe even drift down a bit, more people will be able to move house, more people will be able to buy, and agents and brokers who had paid on transaction fees will make a lot more money if house prices go down. There is no logical counter to that argument. And yet, so every time you see the mortgage industry or estate agents putting out price pumping puff pieces, just think to yourself, dummies. They're doing themselves out of more transactions. Absolute dummies. One last comment on this inflation. The OOH, the OO, which is the owner-occupier housing costs, is continuing to trickle down. This is also partly as a function of rents dropping, I think. But it's still high, 4.2%. And the headline rate's gone up from 3.2% to 3.4%. But CPIH, which is actually a truer figure for housing, has gone up from 3.5 to 3.6%. Right? Not a big jump, but nevertheless, it's an unwelcome thing on all fronts. Okay. Last but not least, and this echoes my previous point, right? Largest price increase for the month of January on record, and they pump it out there like it's a good thing. Come on, think about it. The number in that box, if you want to pull out good news, that means more people buy houses and Rightmove, your estate agency clients sell more houses and get happier. The intelligent number to put in that box would have been the one from just, and you do change those numbers around, right? You put in that number, that box there, you change every month. There's a different metric in that box every month, right? What you should have put at least in that box there is, oh, look, the annual change in first-time buyer asking prices is down 0.7%. That is good news. That's good news. So if anyone from Rightmove is watching this, please have a chat, talk to yourselves, ask yourself and say, might it make sense to actually show that affordability is a good thing? Because if affordability improves, we sell more houses and more mortgages. So Rightmove's Rightmove's three biggest customers are estate agents who pay a subscription, house builders who sell houses, new house builders, and mortgage lenders who sell mortgages, all of whom would sell more stuff if affordability was better. So I would recommend that they have a rethink about the strategy of pumping prices. It's like punching yourself in the face, guys. It really is. Doesn't make any sense at all. So that's it. That's 5 facts. I've done that in half an hour. Cool. Do we have any questions? Any questions? Any comments? Morning, guys. Let me look TV. Hello there. Andrew Dennis. Yeah, Alex Jenkinson. As John Locke said, government is there, or should be there, to protect our life, liberty, and property. Correct. And it's not doing very well on any of those fronts, is it? Um, oh, Duncan C. I've just dissolved my company, my limited company, after 20 years trading. Work landscape is shifting dramatically. Tough times that'll probably only get worse with AI rollout. Virtually everyone will be affected. Very sorry to hear that, Duncan. I sadly can't disagree with you. This really genuinely feel like, car dealerships closing, restaurants closing, pubs closing, companies announcing layoffs, employment numbers going up. This really feels reminiscent of the early 90s, which I remember because I was 18, 19, 20. I remember it. I remember it well. I remember what it felt like. I was down in Brighton over Christmas and New Year. And Brighton was my original stomping ground. It's where I finished my A levels after I got kicked out of school. And it's where I bought my first flat, just off $7 roundabout behind the station, which I got for 35% off the asking price. Yeah, knew what I was doing even then. And I've seen Brighton, and back then in those times in the 90s, Brighton was a bit downtrodden. It was a bit skanky. I loved it anyway. I mean, it was just such a cool place, such a fun place to go. The Market Diner, the open all night Market Diner, the Zap nightclub on the seafront, the Gloucester nightclub where legend had it that they only let you in if you did have a knife. It wasn't that bad, but and then in the last couple of decades, Brighton's been massively gentrified. And you go back there a few years ago, and Brighton felt like literally like a gentrified suburb of London. But you go back there now, and it's feeling really like it's gone back down again. Lots of boarded up places, boarded up businesses. It's really got the feel of recession. Yeah, Kicking Mustang confirming house prices are a function of rental yield. So that's why rents going down is a good thing for house prices, for people, for affordability. I will never back down from saying that affordability is the most important metric in housing. Right? So if it's good for affordability, it's good for everyone. I don't know if this is serious or not. Sound Texture says, I am a short, bald, ugly, working class incel. I will be living in a HMO for life. Well, if that is sincere, I don't really know what to say about that, other than sorry to hear that you'll be living in an HMO for life. If that is done in irony as an observation of society as a whole, well, yeah, I'm beginning to regret actually responding to that comment now. But sorry to hear that. This is a good question that I will answer. New name, Winnie the Flu. Welcome. Should I take advantage of the economic conditions to negotiate asking price? Obviously, everyone should always be paying the price that's appropriate to them personally, given the conditions, the market for the property that you're looking at. What you should never do is go into an agent and say, well, the market's really bad, so that's why I'm going to offer low. Right? Because that's a mistaken attitude or approach. No matter what the market conditions are, your approach should be, if you're buying a home, and I'm only talking about buying a home, not talking about investors, your approach should be, what is the maximum comfortable price? People hearing this for the first time will never actually do it. You only learn the hard way that you'll be outbid and then think, hang on, we would have paid more. Okay, we should have offered more. What is your maximum comfortable price for that particular property in your personal circumstances? There is never an exception to that in the scenario where you are buying a home to live in for the long term, right? The maximum comfortable price, you don't offer more and you don't offer less. And And even if you're the only person offering on a property, I mean, that should factor into your price, because if no one else is bidding on it, why do you don't want to, you shouldn't be paying more than you think you could sell it for the next day, right? And if you don't think you could sell it for that price the next day, why would you offer what you're offering? Now, if it's in order to get the deal done and you can afford it, then fine. But even when you're offering and you know that there are other people offering, that should not alter what the property is worth to you personally. Okay. You should, what do I need to pay? There's never an exception. The maximum comfortable price for that property in your circumstances is the only price you should ever offer. And that's why my email offer template has this first and final offer concept in it. This is not how you would approach it if you're an investor. This is not how you would approach it if you're a landlord buying up. Okay. This is how you approach it when you're buying a home, because when you're buying a home, your reasons for buying a home are not primarily financial. They shouldn't be anyway. You should be buying a home because that's where you want to live. You should be buying a home because that's the location, that's the property. You're going to be happy there. It's where you might want to stay long term. You may or may not raise a family, etc. And then, of course, you should be looking for the best value for money for your budget, all things considered. But in the economic conditions at the moment are definitely favoring the market in favor of buyers. Angela Ramsey says, why did you get kicked out of school? Well, that's a story for another day. I think I may have answered that on my personal YouTube channel some time ago. You might find, I can't remember, it's been a few years ago. I might have answered that over there. 12 volt, that's where you know me from. Makes sense now. Where do you know me from? Duncan C says, thanks, Charlie. I agree. It's all very early 90s. One of Maggie's millions then, pulled myself up only to become one of Starmer's millions now. I think, yeah, you're right. Millions is. Andrew Dennis says, hope is going out of life. No, I don't think it's ever that bad. I think optimism, it's better to be optimistic and wrong than pessimistic and right, I think someone said yesterday. I don't have opinion on individual markets. I can't answer that. Mark JWG says, I used Help to Buy 12 years ago. Oh, it was lucky. It was that long ago. Bought for 300k and sold for 400k. Used Help to Buy again. Can you do it twice? I thought it was a first time buyer only thing. Or not? Sold after 3 years for 45k profit. Now renting and watching. Horrified now, seeing the effect Help to Buy had on the market. Yeah. London Girl 293 says, are there any situations when you would sell via auction rather than an estate agent, e.g. unregistered, renovation required, etc.? Okay, good question. So if you have a property that is mortgageable, where mainstream lenders are going to find it a property that's an acceptable risk for them to provide a mortgage on, generally speaking, it's better to go with an agent, as long as you find a good one, because you are more likely to achieve the best possible price for it. Okay. This is just my opinion. There will be people who may disagree with this, but this is my view. This is what I would do, right? So if your property is mortgageable, then the market for your property is large. When you go to an auction, you're going to a very limited market. There are benefits. I'll come on to those in a second. But a mortgageable property has a large market, provided you bring it to market at the right price. The problem is that most sellers, and indeed agents now, are even struggling to come to terms with the truth of what's happening to leasehold prices in London, are still bringing property to market at too high a price. If you can bring it to market at a price that creates, for a flat, you should be getting 20, 25 people through the door in the first 2 weeks. You will get a better price, provided there are no inherent problems with the property, right? You will get a better price for the property through an estate agent. on the condition you get a good estate agent and they know what they're actually doing. They know how to create a market for the property. If there are things to do with that property that mean that actually it's not going to get a mortgage, then suddenly you've got a very, very much smaller market. It's weird that, isn't it? Debt creates prices going up. It's true, right? So people who have to buy a property without using debt, they're using just cash. It's a much smaller market. You're going to get less for it anyway. And therefore, with a smaller market, it's harder to create a proper market for the property. And if you have any time pressure, and there are any complications with property, then yes, at that point, that it might make more sense to go through an auction. But before going to an auction, my first port of call, if it wasn't mortgageable, my first port of call, if it was a potentially rentable property, would be to go to a lettings agent, like a really good local lettings agent that's got a big portfolio and therefore they know lots of landlords who buy with cash. And I would say to them, if you think the property is rentable, do any of your landlords want to buy my unmortgageable but rentable property for cash? And sometimes, a few phone calls, they can find you a buyer, and you may or may not get the price you want. The auction is the last resort, right? It's the last resort, and if selling is a requirement, if you need and want to sell, and you find yourself going, got to go to auction, there's no point putting a reserve on it. I don't understand why people do that. Unless you actually cannot sell below a certain price, like you are somehow prevented from selling below a certain price, in which case, of course, you have to have a reserve in the auction. There's no point in having a reserve if you have to sell. Ruth 1231 says, there's always hope. I was a young adult in the early 80s and things seemed bleak, but things change. I tell my son, a young adult now, this all the time, as things are bleak for young adults. Things are bleak. Now, it's important to point out that the young adults of today have got all kinds of wonderful things that the young adults of 40 years ago did not have. Access to music, the sheer quantity. I mean, back in the day, you had to save up money and go out and buy a physical piece of music, a cassette or a record, and that's all you could listen to. Or the radio. Yeah, but if you wanted to just listen to what you wanted to, you had to go and buy it. And it was expensive. But you listen to it over and over again. It was lovely. And now, for free, you can listen to anything as many times as you want. That's really, really cool. Okay. I think music's important, especially in dark times. So that's something that young adults today have. Imagine no Spotify. Imagine none of that online streaming music, right? And in a way, one of the things that was nice about the back in the day is that actually you would actually go around to people's houses just to share your music. You'd swap tapes and stuff, whatever. And the other thing, as a car lover, back in the 80s, we did not have this extraordinary array of choice of genuinely cool and reliable, fun cars from 20 years ago, right? In the 80s, you couldn't buy cars from the 60s. They'd already given up, rusted away, But now you can buy cars from the early 2000s for next to nothing, and they're brilliant. And there are millions of different choices. It's amazing. So that's one thing that I am jealous of the young today compared. So there are very few things, right? By the way, our music back in the 80s was better than it is today. But you guys have got all of that as well. So you get the best of both worlds. But for cars, I mean, we had just rust buckets and not very many of them. And if you wanted a really good, nice car, they just, it was much harder back then. You really had to work for it. I remember going through so many buying and selling little cars, trying to trade up a tiny bit each time. Great fun. But today, the cars you can get today for next to no money. Absolutely amazing. So yeah, there you are. There's a bit of optimism. Who calls me a doom monger? No, I'm not. Winnie the Flu says, how risky for a London flat price to go down? I have the fear I have the fear. The price going down fear. It will be my personal home, not speculation. It always makes a good idea to make offer below asking price. Uh, Ignore the asking price, right? Ignore the market conditions, ignore the asking price, work out the price to you, right? The price to you in your circumstances for that property in this market conditions. But if you're buying to live in it, which you say you are, for a long time, you don't need to worry about the price going down. Okay. In the long run, you will not really notice or feel that price. Don't expect the price to go up. London flat prices have already experienced a very big fall. I suspect that they may fall a bit further. Factor that into your offer when you're offering. Johnny Bell says, "Hi Charlie, we found a house for sale. Offers above 550." Says who? It's been on the market for 9 months. Right, here's a classic example of an over optimistic seller. Let's be charitable, and an incompetent agent, because this is a classic case of where the seller and the agent are ignoring the market. Well, I want this for it. Well, let's put it on at that price with offers over. Because if we just ask for it, someone will just come along and pay it, right? Excuse me. If it's been on the market for 9 months, you viewed it, you like it, you wanted to put an offer in, there is never a reason not to make your offer. Now, how you present your offer is very important, because if you want to have a chance of getting your offer accepted, you need to make it as attractive as you can, leaving aside the fact that the actual number itself is going to be disappointing for the seller. Okay, use my email template. Make sure you've got everything lined up. Conveyancer who's approved your source of deposit funds, proof of deposit funds, mortgage in principle, conveyancer have already said, and the offer of purchasing a search pack immediately, having the offers accepted. In other words, show that you can move very fast, because sometimes when people have been on the market for a very long time and a buyer comes along and says, we could exchange within 2-3 weeks because we're so ready, sometimes sellers will go, you know what, that sounds so good, we're just going to cut our losses, take the money and get out. Now, I have no idea whether or not the seller is in a position to do that or will do that or not. I don't know. But never don't put the offer in. Put it in writing, put it respectfully. But if you just verbally go to the agent, well, we're thinking of an offer of 466,000, what do you think? They're going to laugh at you. So make the offer respectful and credible in the manner in which you deliver it. Offer a much shorter transaction time, a much quicker sale. Show that you can actually do that. Don't just say you can do it. Everyone says they can do stuff and don't back it up. Back up what you're offering. And, maybe you'll get it for that price if it's your first and final price. If you could go higher and they say, look, we might come down to 470, just making the offer opens the conversation. If you don't make the offer, guess what? You'll never get it. Guaranteed you won't get it if you don't offer. Always, 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 always offer. AOK says, you say don't overpay, but I have no idea what figure to offer when no homes have recently sold in the area. I will say it again. How much can you afford? How much is a property worth to you? That's your offer. Okay. If you can afford it comfortably and it's worth it to you to have that home, you're not overpaying. Okay. You might be paying more than the market for it right now, but if you get it for a price you're happy with and you enjoy living there and it doesn't put you in a financial stress situation, you haven't overpaid. Overpaying is a subjective thing. Okay. If you're buying, then yes, you've got to be much more careful about overpaying. But the way to figure it out, only you know what your own personal budget comfort level is. If you're someone who's actually got plenty of money, you can easily afford this property, but you don't want to pay more than market. Well, watch it. Like stand back and see what's happening. How long has it been on the market? Has it had other offers? and start to work out the price where you think, I don't want to pay a price I couldn't sell it for the next day, but I do want to get it. And you'll figure it out. You'll get there. Right, I've got to go in a minute. Rosedale C says, follow-up question, re-auctions. Do you see the modern method auctions becoming more popular in future, especially for properties where there's a lack of similar on which to establish a launch price? I I don't like the modern method of auction. It's a bit icky. It's just a bit, everyone's making a bit of money out of it apart from the seller. I mean, the buyer's being rinsed, the buyer's paying fees, the agent's getting a fee without, just from an introduction. So the agent introduces you to the modern method of auction, they make a cut on it. It's just like it wouldn't exist if estate agents could do their job properly. It's a little bit like, well, we're too shit to actually get a market for your property, but lob it in there. The buyer pays your fees for you. And so we're doing, hey, all good, right? Buyer pays the fees, you get it sold. That agent makes a referral commission from the modern method of auction. You get much less for it than you otherwise would on the open market. Is there a place for it? I suppose so, but I would never go there. I would either sell it on the open market with a good estate agent, or go to an auction. It's just a bit scammy. It's not illegal. It's just a bit scammy. I don't like it. Oh, that's amazing. Ruth again. Charlie, my son lost a job recently and hasn't found anything else. He was down, but he has set up his own business doing something he loves. Who knew? And news from him yesterday shows it's starting to take off. Oh, that's amazing. That's an uplifting bit of news. I love it when I see young people who just stepped out on their own to do whatever, just hard graft jobs. I saw someone the other day. I went on a house viewing the other day for reasons that don't matter. And there was a guy, that a tree had come down in the garden, and he was there on his own. He had this big, cool Land Rover, and he had a chainsaw, and he was just grafting. Self-employed guy, getting paid, doing something he appeared to enjoy. Like, there's no one that can't do that. I just don't see any excuse for that. You just got to get off your arse. There are things that can be done by people even with no qualifications. There are demand for things, cleaning, where there's muck, there's money. And when we moved out of our last place, there was an amazing guy, self-employed, had his own van, and he came around, he did this deep clean on the house. He was cheerful, he was professional, he was thoughtful, he cared about his reputation, he had good social media, he worked his arse off with all this equipment, did an amazing job, and was earning a good living, working for himself in his own time, master of his own destiny. He had no staff, just him, so he had no staff hassle, and he had lots of customers who were recommending him. I just, there's no excuse for anyone not to do that kind of stuff, and there's always a need for it. If things get to that point. Kate Beast says, I'm a first-time buyer and I've been looking to buy a flat in Brighton for a few months. Lots of properties to choose from. Been renting here for 8 years and loving it. Your channel has helped massively. Thank you. Yeah, Brighton's a great place. I do love Brighton. In the 80s and 90s, you could buy cheap hot hatches. Yeah, but you used to die quite quickly in those. I drove most of the hot hatches in the 80s. I had a few of them. I had a Golf GTI, the 16 valve, had a Golf VR6 in the early 90s. Oh, brand new Golf VR6 when I was 23. But I remember driving the 205 1.9 GTI. That was just a lethal death trap. My brother had one. Johnny Bell says, should I use the same agent as the seller if I have two properties to sell to buy the other? Only if you think they're a really good agent and like a decent, honest, trustworthy agent who knows what they're doing, there is an advantage to that. If they're not, if they're a scheming, self-serving agent, then no, I wouldn't do that. because what they'll do is they'll look to game it however they can in their own interests, and I won't go into it now, but there are ways they can do that. Anoop says, hi, Charlie. Thanks for what you're doing on the channel. Very helpful. You're welcome. Glenn W. What will have the greatest fall in 2026? A, AI stocks. B, London house prices. Or C, Humpty Dumpty? Very good question. Yeah, the auction I'm looking at, the buyer fees are near 10% of the opening bid. Is that a modern method auction? Scammy, scammy, scammy. Right, guys, got to wrap it up here. I hope those of you who got my newsletter this morning enjoyed it. Conveyancing. Everyone who moves house will need a conveyancer, whether you like it or not. Finding a good one is very important. Don't cut costs on that. It's a false economy. If you can't find one that you trust and know is reliable and does a good job, talk to my guys, mhwc.co.uk/conveyancing. Similar with mortgage. If you need a mortgage, always talk to whole of market independent mortgage broker, always. And if you want to talk to my guys, they are outstanding. Been working with them for years now. mhwc.co.uk/mortgage. Same with the property pack. When you're making your offer, property-pack. Go to that URL to read about it and watch videos on what they are and why you need to have one if you're a buyer. Other than that, guys, I hope you have a fantastic Friday, a great weekend. And despite the suboptimal economic conditions we're out there, I hope you can find a way to have some fun and enjoy yourself and enjoy your friends and family with some music, with cars, if that's your thing, getting out, having a walk, whatever. Keep your pecker up.